whole week of celebration in the swamps. Trump praises Putin and launches aggressive criticism against Ukraine and Europe. In Moscow, the annual stock of champagne has been consumed. The shaman can't keep up with changing leather pants due to endless festive concerts in the Kremlin offices.
And when the enemy finds themselves at the last line, especially after hearing such words about themselves from the world's #1 leader, well, probably they will now try to show that they are not so bad and that they have some capabilities.
Did you hear that right? Z-Patriots are so delighted that they openly admit that the President of the USA is the world's #1 leader.
What is this? Have they completely lost their minds, you understand?
But the euphoria from Trump in the Kremlin didn't last long. With a hangover came the harsh realization that the West has not abandoned Ukraine and does not intend to. And Uncle Sam's words radically differ from his actions.
Well, just to answer you regarding why it's strange, why there seems to be such a one-sided policy from the new administration, such exclusive pressure on Zelensky. No, it's not exclusively pressure on Zelensky. I think that, Russia is also being pressured, just in a different way.
How?
Specifically by the method, we will not cancel what was decided, including in the last days of the previous administration, including sanctions like those on the Shadow Fleet and so on. This is quite a serious problem for Russia.
The new American administration can indeed call Zelensky a dictator and Putin a sweetheart as much as they want, but they do not stop military and economic aid.
The West, that is. They are preparing reserves, and they are deploying them, and we see them on the line of combat contact. And there are weapons, a sea of drones, electronic warfare systems, equipment, and 70 F-16s are roaming around somewhere. And they have started using bombs. You can't just throw hats and caps at them.
Musk, raging on Twitter, accuses Ukraine of all mortal sins, but at the same time declares that he will not turn off Starlink. And the Russian propaganda, which was delighted by his famous salute, now has to backtrack on the fly and lament live on air.
Why shrugging shoulders? What's the problem? Is Starlink still operating in Ukraine? Well, they promised, so I'm kind of waiting, right? Are military supplies continuing? Yes, from what was there under Biden, but they continue.
Joe-son, no packages?
Are American military instructors present in Ukraine? As far as I understand, they are. So are they conducting shelling using American intelligence data? They are. I would be expecting this to happen.
Then it would be more effective for us.
No, it would be more like that, you see? Because for now, it's all just words.
In the Kremlin, they somehow believed that Trump would come and establish the Russian world across the planet. But it turns out a bit differently. Intentionally or accidentally, Trump, with his rhetoric, has united and inspired the entire Western world to fight against Russia. Europe is experiencing its own political renaissance. Its support for Ukraine has only strengthened, both military and financial. The EU is imposing new sanctions against the orcs, targeting banks and the tanker fleet. Britain is allocating a record aid package to Kiev. France is ready to send troops to Ukraine. And in Germany, the most pro-Ukrainian political force wins the elections.
So, in reality, we are witnessing an absolute response in Europe. I would say that probably Trump is displeased with the messages from J.D. Vance and Trump about the necessity for Europe to handle its own defense. And why did we suddenly decide that this is a very positive agenda?
Just yesterday, you won't believe it. Sorry for interrupting. Just yesterday, at this moment. Yes, I was just talking about this yesterday. Why do we assume that this is good? And why do we assume that, for instance, if the Americans stop supplying weapons or money, Europe won't consolidate even more?
Russian propaganda outlets were hit with a cold shower. They realized there that there will be no capitulation of Ukraine, that they made this up themselves along with a group of horses that happily returned from Saudi Arabia.
So the conversation was, I believe, very useful. We didn't just listen, but we heard each other. And I have reason to believe that the American side has come to better understand our position.
Of course.
Of course. Of course.
The carnival called Trump is Ours ended with somber gatherings in studios, where they began to paint grim pictures of the future for the Russian Reich. Russian propaganda is experiencing a shameful déjà vu. They shouted for a whole week about an imminent victory, just like in February 2022 when they yelled that Ukraine was defeated, Zelensky was overthrown, and Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa had fallen. Here are literally a few victory-crazed posts from February 24, 2022. In 6 hours of Russia's war with Ukraine, Ukraine lost its entire navy, all naval bases and ports, 95% of its air defense, all headquarters and airfields, and even lost Kharkiv.
It's absolutely wrong to laugh at sick people.
The Z-Telegram Notes of a Veteran really delivered a gem. A brief summary of 12 hours of war. Ukrainian propaganda operates as if they have been holding back our troops for 3 years already. Hello? It's only been 12 hours.
Ironic.
It's been a little more than 12 hours. Namely, 3 years. And Notes of a Veteran hasn't been sparking with optimism for a long time. Here's one of his latest posts. Tonight, an attack by enemy long-range UAVs on Russian territory is likely. Or, for example, the supply of Western weapons to the enemy is not stopping at all.
It's frightening, very frightening. We don't know what it is, perhaps. If we knew what it was, we wouldn't know what it is.
Oh, how it all began! America stopped being called Pindosia again, and the St. Petersburg Cossacks restored Trump's rank of Assal. Don't be surprised, it turns out Trump had such a rank.
What kind of rank?
Moreover, Trump declared himself a monarch. And Russians, they love nothing more than to lick the feet of a czar. It seemed like here it is, a bipolar world, within the reach of Peskov's mustache. But again, it happened, as the classic said.
They were fooled, just blatantly deceived.
Russian propaganda and Kremlin mold once again believed in their own nonsense. And they were very upset when it turned out that it was indeed nonsense.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
There are people living there who are waiting for us.
And what makes you think that?
Because I know.
Seriously, and how do they show themselves?
The main disappointment, of course, swept over the meat orcs. All their hope for survival was pinned on Trump. That finally there would be a truce, and they could peacefully return home, terrorize their neighbors, and fence with beer bottles behind the garages.
But our infantry is wearing down. These are our people, after all, and an incredible number of them have already been buried. Russia, when will you realize you...
The orcs realized with horror that they would continue to be driven to slaughter, and they will die not for some mythical denazification or even demilitarization, but for the so-called improvement of the negotiating position. In other words, thousands of our boys will be traded for a few hundred square meters, so that Pina and his pedal horse can more confidently negotiate the lifting of sanctions for themselves. On Mayusom, blame Figa in Rayo poured on Lev. In Russia, at all levels, they have come to realize that no matter what position Trump takes, there will be no capitulation of Ukraine. Europe will only grow stronger, and the occupiers will continue to be hit both on the battlefield and in the economic arena. Even in the Kremlin, they can no longer hide the grim reality. Recently, the Minister of Economic Development of Mordor, Reshetnikov, sadly opened up.
We are now seeing the first signs of a slowdown in the economy. Already by the end of November, and especially December, we see that growth has ceased to be widespread. We observe a slowdown in growth rates in several sectors, in the food industry, in the chemical industry, in woodworking, and in certain branches of mechanical engineering. The volume of orders for businesses is decreasing. A striking example here is the automotive market, where due to high loan rates, sales are falling, not only of passenger vehicles, but mainly of special equipment.
Amazingly, in 3 years, Moscow has not learned one main lesson. You cannot underestimate Ukraine. You cannot ignore the opinion of the Ukrainian people and try to negotiate behind their backs. Moscow, like a mentally ill person, continues to convince itself that Ukraine's weight is insignificant, and Washington can simply tell it what to do. The stubbornness and narrow-mindedness of the orcs are truly impressive.
Ukraine will absolutely never accept agreements made behind our backs without our participation and consent. The same rule should indeed apply to all of the European continent. No decisions about Ukraine without Ukraine. No decisions about Europe without Europe.
I would like to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated form to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. Our goal is not to mislead, but to highlight humor. Please take it with a smile.